A few years ago, I read this book called Cult Following. It is a nonfiction memoir written by Bexy Cameron. Bexy Cameron grew up in a cult called the Children of God cult. She was born into that cult. And I remember feeling very intrigued by the subject matter after I finished reading this book. The subject matter being of lives of children who were born into cults rather than them actively choosing to join the cult themselves. When I saw this book called Sex Cults None, I knew that I had to read it. This is a nonfiction memoir as well, and it's the story of Faith Jones. Faith Jones was the granddaughter of David Berg, who is the founder of the Children of God cult, or the cult known as the Family. Now, if you are unfamiliar with this cult, with who they are, with what they've done, I would recommend doing a little bit of research beforehand because they were notorious for a lot of abuse, especially the abuse towards children. Faith Jones grew up in the bubble of the Children of God cult. She spent a portion of her life learning from the cult's values, their systems, and their rules. She talks about her experiences growing up in this cult from her early adolescence all the way to her early adult years. She talks about the experiences that she had overall growing up in a very unconventional way, but she also talks about some of the abuses that she faced living in this cult. Faith's story is one that I would consider a story of resilience, a story of great determination. She really ends up finding her strength when it comes to leaving, and then she talks about how she basically works really hard to make a life of herself outside of the cult. Not only does she talk about the dynamics of what it's like living in a cult, but she also talks about how hard it is to actually leave a cult, especially when you've been integrated into these cults for a really long period of time. Faith obviously manages to find her own way out, of course, but it isn't the same for everyone else around her. She talks about the people that she also knows who are a part of the cult, what their lives were like during and even after. As I mentioned earlier, I did read Cult Following a few years before, which was Bexy Cameron's story, which there are similar parallels of what the two girls endured and experienced. I do feel like that while both these women went through some very traumatic experiences in their life, and while some of their experiences are very similar, the one thing that I will say is you do get a very comprehensive understanding of what it was like to grow up in the Children of God cult when you listen to Faith Jones's story. So much of her life was woven into the cult's values, into their systems, into their beliefs, that so much of it was just so normalized for her. This is a 5-star read for me. It's perfect for audiobook fans, for nonfiction readers, and for people who enjoy reading memoirs and biographies. I highly recommend giving this book a read. Faith's story is very strong and very resilient, and I really do love the messages that she leaves you with towards the end of her book.